We've all assembled here today to commemorate the 101st birth anniversary of Dr. Satya Paul, the inspiration behind the diversified conglomerate of APJ Satya and Swaran Group. A leader par excellence and a legend who was one of the principal architects of India's emergence as a self-reliant industrial nation founded on the strength of Indian capability and enterprise. Dr. Satyapal is the pioneer visionary behind the APJ Education Society, which runs 24 educational institutions across the country and the APJ Satya University. The APJ Education Society recently celebrated its 50 years, another significant milestone in its remarkable journey. It gives me immense pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our chief guest of the day, Dr. Krishnaswamy Kasturi Rangan, Padma Vibhushan awardee, Mrs. Sushma Paul Barlia, co-promoter and president, APJ Satya and Swaran Group, chairman of APJ Education Society and chancellor, APJ Satya University, Mr. Vijay Barlia, chairman, Swaran Group, Shri Anup Jalota ji, Padma Shri awardee, and all other dignitaries, parents, students, and our extended APJ Satya family to today's function. I now request our chief guest, Dr. Krishnaswamy Kasturi Rangan, Shri Anup Jalota, Mr. and Mrs. Barlia, and their family members to light the ceremonial lamp.
सर्वकार्येषु माधवम् षोडशैतानि नामानि प्रातरुत्थाय यः पठेत् सर्वपापविनिर्मुक्तो विष्णुलोके महीयते सर्वपापविनिर्मुक्तो विष्णुलोके महीयते सर्वपापविनिर्मुक्तो विष्णुलोके महीयते सर्वपापविनिर्मुक्तो विष्णुलोके
I now invite Madam Sushma Paul Barlia, daughter and the only child of Dr. Satya Paul, to offer Vinamra Shraddhanjali. Mrs. Barlia will now light a diya at Chairman Sir's portrait.
द्रवेरस्तं समारभ्य यावत् सूर्योदयो भवेत् द्रवेरस्तं समारभ्य यावत् सूर्योदयो भवेत् यस्य तिष्ठेत् गृहे दीपः तस्य नास्ति दरिद्रता शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
Dr. Satya Paul's life is a glorious example of a true karma yogi. Carrying forward the legacy of Dr. Satya Paul is his daughter and the only child, Mrs. Sushma Paul Barlia. A multi-dimensional personality, Mrs. Barlia is a leading entrepreneur, industrialist, and educationist who has devoted her life to nation building with global footprints. She is a humanitarian, a worthy daughter, a caring spouse, a nurturing mother, an indulgent grandmother, but above all, an alchemist who performs all her roles with great ease to create a shining and inspiring story. A woman of many parts, but the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Mrs. Berlia was the first woman to lead a multi state apex chamber of commerce in India, serving as the president of PHDCCI in 2005 2006. She was the first woman in India to lead her own pharmaceutical company when not yet 30, and was the first woman entrepreneur of a major educational group in India. Mrs. Berlia is a former member of the Board of Governors, IIT Roorkee, and former chairperson, Board of Governors, NIT, Jalandhar. She is the chairperson of ASSOCHAM's National Council for Ease of Doing Business and is also a member of the National Management Committee of ASSOCHAM and FICCI. In 1995, Mrs. Berlia represented India at the UN World Social Summit at Copenhagen and delivered the keynote address on the role of women at the workplace. A humanitarian to the core, Mrs. Sushma Paul Berlia has always championed such causes as working for the physically challenged, economically weaker sections of society and empowerment of women. Mrs. Berlia has won numerous awards and accolades for her immense contribution towards academia and industry. She was felicitated by the Skilltree Knowledge Consortium at the House of Commons, London, for her contribution to Indian education and industry. She was conferred the Hall of Fame Award by the Asian Leadership Awards, Dubai, and the very prestigious Udyog Ratan Award. She was the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award for promoting education for social cause by ASSOCHAM, the Mahatma Gandhi Samman at the House of Commons, and also the ET Inspiring Entrepreneur of India by Economic Times recently, amongst others. Mrs. Sushma Paul Berlia has abiding interests beyond the realms of work. She is a voracious reader and loves to travel to new destinations. She is highly reflective and her spiritual pursuits are intertwined in her busy schedules. Indeed, she is as much focused on achieving as she is on the joy of living and giving. I now request Madam Sushma Paul Berlia to address the gathering.
You have to unmute yourself, ma'am.
गुरु गोबिंद दो खड़े काके लागू पाए, बलिहारी गुरु आपने गोबिंद दियो बताए. My God and my Guru, both are standing before me. Whose feet should I touch first? I commence by touching the feet of my Guru, because it is through him that I have learned to live my life. It is he who has been my spiritual mentor, so that I have come to know God. My Guru, my father, Dr. Satya Paul. Today, as we are gathered here together, and I find that we have people from all walks of life. Dr. Krishna Swami, Kasturi Rangan, Padma Vibhushan, our chief guest for today, music Sangeet Samrat, Shri Anup Jalota ji, and so many distinguished guests in all dimensions. I thought I would commence by saying at least a few names, but I find that I'm at a complete loss, because as I read through all those who had said that they would join in today and I know are listening to us here, they are at the peaks of the captains of the industry, the heads of the chambers of commerce, secretaries, ministers, distinguished people in different walks of life: music, science, arts, educationists. And many of them, many of us here have been compatriots of my father, his dear friends, have walked some of that journey with him. And many of us here who may not have necessarily known him personally, but have been touched in some way or the other by the dream that he dreamt and that he took forward. I wished that I could take the names of all those who have joined us today, but I find myself unequal to the task because each of you is as precious as the other. So I bow to all of you in gratitude and in regard for joining us on this such a very special and momentous occasion today. When we were thinking of commemorating and celebrating my father's 101st birth celebrations, the thought arose that right now we are in such challenging times with the pandemic that we are facing, the loss of lives, the kind of everyday challenges each one of us are facing in different ways, personally, in business, in our livelihood, in so many areas. But then to me, it seemed, and to all of us when we talked about it, that now more than ever is the time that we should celebrate this life, because there's one single word that defines what his life was about, and that is resilience. And that is the word that perhaps we need today more than ever before. We all know his life too well, but I think it's important on this occasion and in our current challenges that we are facing to remind ourselves of all that he lived and that he did. It can't be encompassed in a few words, but just a few highlights to remind ourselves some of those things. As you know, he was born in a fairly humble family that migrated from Haryana, well, that was part of Punjab in those days, but Bhiwani to Jalandhar via Lahore. And when he was 2 to 3 years old, he was afflicted by polio. His left side was impacted, his left leg was bent in, his left arm was much weaker, and he used to walk with crutches. It was only much later in life, when the family could afford it, that he had to go all the way to US and Boston to have the surgery that enabled him to walk with calipers and a walking stick. But that did not deter him. He continued going to school. He was a brilliant scholar. He worked hard. I have personally been to that school in Jalandhar. Even today, if you walk there, and I don't know what it was like in those days, but students were still sitting on the ground. In those days, of course, they didn't have notebooks. They had what they called tucks, which they kind of wrote on daris. They were staircases so steep that even for young people, when we think about climbing it, we feel a little worried. No railings. And I was thinking, standing there, that every day this little boy with his crutches, and we know what school is like when children are rushing up and down, was walking up those steps and down those steps. Look at that indomitable spirit and courage that he had. He studied most of his life with the help of a lantern because the family could not afford electricity in those days. They were in a small business of making buckets, but you can understand how small that business was. Well, he went on to he got a merit scholarship and went to college. He did his bachelor's, he did his master's. He was a mathematician, gold medalist, and he wanted to go back and teach. But he could not teach at the college that he applied for because refused him account of being physically challenged. So he went back to that little business that his family had set up. And meanwhile, he'd already lost his mother at a young age, and then he lost his father. But he continued, and in a way, the rest is history, because he built it up over time into one of the known industrial empires of the country. But before this journey, he was also a freedom fighter. He was part of the Quit India movement. He went to jail for 51 days on account of distributing seditious literature and encouraging rebellion against the British. He was destined to go to Andaman Nicobar, to Kalapani, and we know what happened to people who went to Kalapani at that time. But fortunately, as fate would have it, a general amnesty was granted and he was able to come back. At that time, he had been offered that if you give up, if you promise, if you commit that you will stop doing all of this, we will not send you to Andaman. But he said no. But he survived that. So again, that indomitable spirit. And one of the things he always shared with me was, for him, that was a defining moment in his life. Because what is there to fear once you have faced death? And he was fearless throughout his life. He always said, you die once when you die, but you keep on dying 1,000 deaths if you continue to fear death. He went through partition, and partition was, as we know, one of the most challenging times people lived through, and he was right in the heart of it in Punjab. He was single-handedly instrumental for having many lives saved during those times. Post-independence, as he built the business starting from steel, the country needed to build its infrastructure. He was offered many a times, many positions, because he had worked hand in hand with the leaders of that time who had all been part of the freedom movement. But he wanted to contribute to nation building through education. He really felt that there was a crying need for educational institutions of the kind that could truly build the people of future that this country would need. He wanted to build schools with an environment that would help nurture a child in all dimensions: physical, mental, spiritual, artistic, emotional, all of it. And with that aim in mind, he first started by giving away part of the house that he lived in for a school to be run by the Arya Samaj locally. But then he soon realized that if he really needed to accomplish his dreams and have the kind of school that he had in mind, he would have to oversee and lead that mission, if you will. Because he also wanted to build scientific temper. He wanted an alignment with global vision, thoughts, and ideas. And he also wanted an education that continued to be rooted not only in Indian culture, but most of all, human values. And that was the foundation of the first APJ school in Jalandhar. Eventually, the first APJ College of Fine Arts in Jalandhar, that started as Rajeshwari Kala Sangam, an institution for women, with the thought that for him, the education of the girl child and of the girl woman was the most important task before the nation. For him, it was not the thought that somehow girls should be given an equal opportunity. For him, he saw no difference between a boy or a girl. And that is perhaps how I have been brought up and what I have imbibed through him. Many institutions were set up, and eventually the APJ Satya University, which imbibed many of the and resonates many of what we see as the vision in the new education policy in terms of liberal arts, in terms of the academic system, bringing in the best of global education from the Ivy League institutions, and yet seeing that they are rooted in Indian values and human culture. At the end of it, the most important thing that we take away from this life before us is that towards the very end, he passed away when he was getting ready to go to work. He continued to work dedicatedly through his life, and he continued to give in every way. He gave of himself and he gave of his wealth. For him, business was not about creation of money, it was about creation of wealth, wealth for all, and his way of giving back to society. He contributed in so many ways through scholarships, through giving seed capital to somebody who wanted to set up their own business, and most of it anonymously. But why am I sharing all of this? He never desired any monuments to himself, but they are living monuments in the shape of the heart, in shape of the what he left in the hearts and minds of all those who came in contact with him and all those who are the beneficiaries of the dream that he dreamt. The values that he upheld, dare to dream, determination, dedication, indomitable spirit, core integrity that never compromised on the core values, whatever life brought him. There are always shades of gray in life, but there was a core that he never compromised on. We talk about CSR, but long before that, he was giving away 10%, 15%, contributing in so very many ways of whatever he earned and whatever he accumulated. He did it quietly, he did it without making any outward show of all that was being done. If we look at all of those values and all that we see exhibited in his life, one thing stands out clearly in all of this is what I started with: resilience, determination, dedication, indomitable spirit, core values. All of those resonate within that one word, resilience. And this is what is needed perhaps more than at any other time today. He was multidimensional personality. He was a man for all seasons. He loved poetry. He loved bhajans, ghazals, English poetry. He was very much influenced by Rabindranath Tagore and Vivekananda. He played the harmonium himself and he sang. He was a living example, in a way, Dr. Krishna Swami, of what you have envisaged in the new education policy of somebody who encompassed all dimensions of one's individuality and potential as a human being, to focus them in a direction that led to the maximization of the fullest potential of a man or a woman. I'm truly grateful to Dr. Krishnaswamy Kasturi Rangan for gracing the occasion today. More than anything else, I would perhaps like to echo In his own words, he very kindly sent me a beautiful message on the eve of today, the 101st birth anniversary of Dr. Satya Paul. Sir, your kind greetings, wherein you wished all of us on the birth anniversary of one of the most distinguished sons of the country, Dr. Satya Paul. It is our great privilege that it is being graced today by another equally distinguished son of the country in yourself. While we will be hearing about your very many achievements and contributions in due course, I would like to say that you will be forever remembered amongst everything else that you have achieved in space, in science, and otherwise, for your contribution to national transformation through the new education policy. Your multidimensional personality echoes that of my father. Your inspiration, as I understand, came from the star-studded sky in its fullest grandeur. And you had the great fortune of being mentored by Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. And you chose, while you had the opportunity to go abroad and make your way, to stay behind and contribute to the nation's foray into space. In so many ways, you echo the journey and the path of my father. It is indeed our fortunate and our privilege that you could have been here with us today. We are equally overwhelmed to have with us Shri Anup Jalota ji this evening. As I said, my father was very fond of bhajans, of ghazals, of sangeet. And what a very more beautiful way there could be than to remember him in this very, very special way. For all of us, the key takeaway that I see from the life that we are remembering together, one of the messages that continue to echo in the context even today of where and how we live, and while we exercise our freedom to make decisions at every step, while we exercise our freedom to choose and live, that at every step, at the core, to remember human values, to preserve our, at the core, human values. And we would have then not just been successful, but live a life worth living. I would like to end with one of his favorite couplets from Urdu. Tundiye bade mukalif se na ghabra e ukab. Tundiye bade mukalif means the force of the opposing winds. Ukab is the bird that flies and soars high in the sky. तुंदिए बादे मुकालिफ से न घबराए ए उकाब, ये तो चलती हैं तुझे ऊंचा उठाने के लिए. Do not be afraid of the furious forces of the opposing winds, O bird who soars high in the sky. They only blow to lift you higher and higher. Thank you.
Ridu, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very inspiring and touching address. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed honored to have with us today Dr. Krishnaswamy Kasturi Ranganji, Padma Vibhushan awardee, as our esteemed chief guest. Dr. Kasturi Rangan was chairman of ISRO from 1994 to 2003 and subsequently a member of Rajya Sabha from 2003 to 2009. Concurrently, the director of National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. He served as the member of the erstwhile Planning Commission from 2009 to 14 and headed the Karnataka Knowledge Commission as its chairman for 2 terms. He served as the chairman of the committee entrusted with drafting the new education, in fact, the National Education Policy 2020, which is set to completely transform the educational landscape of India. Dr. Kasturi Rangan is the chairman, governing board, Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics, Pune, chancellor, Central University of Rajasthan, chairman of BOG, Vikram A. Sarabhai Community Science Center, Ahmedabad, and member, Atomic Energy Commission of India. Dr. Kasturi Rangan was the Satish Dhawan Chair of Engineering Eminence instituted by INAE. He is also the fellow of all the 4 major science and engineering academies of India and the only Indian to be conferred the honorary membership of the International Academy of Astronautics, besides being its vice president. Dr. Kasturi Rangan has been bestowed with several awards, including the Brock Medal of International Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, Lifetime Achievement Award of Asia Pacific Satellite Communications Council, Singapore, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award in Engineering, Aryabhat Medal by Indian National Science Academy, and the Vikram Sarabhai Memorial Gold Medal, amongst others. He is also the recipient of many civilian awards at the state, national, and international levels. The prominent ones include the Rajyotsav Prashasti conferred by the government of Karnataka, the Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, and the Padma Vibhushan by the President of India. He was also conferred the Officer of the Legion d'Honneur Award in 2002 by the President of France. I now request Dr. Kasturi Ranganji to address the gathering.
Good evening. I am delighted to be invited to participate in the 101st birth anniversary of one of the most distinguished sons of this country, Dr. Stya Paul. Needless to emphasize, Dr. Stya Paul epitomizes the best of value system and ethos that this country cherishes, besides being a multi-dimensional personality. As a freedom fighter, philanthropist, educationist, and a leading industrialist, among others, Dr. Paul's legacy continues and will continue to guide and inspire generations of Indians. Above all, at the very fundamental level, Dr. Stya Paul was a fine human being, concerned with the wellness and welfare of the society at all times. I'm indeed privileged to be invited for this very special and memorable occasion and would like to express my grateful thanks to Mrs. Sushma Paul Berlia for this. At this juncture, I would like to also mention that Mrs. Sushma Paul Berlia herself is an accomplished and distinguished personality. It is quite evident from the kind of words she just now mentioned and the type of thoughts she shared with all of us. She is a distinguished personality whose influential thinking and actions are already making a major impact across the cross-section of the society. So I would like to use this opportunity to pay my own humble tributes to her for not only being the head of a major institution like the APJ system, but also carrying forward the legacy of this very distinguished son of this country, Dr. Stya. I'm also extremely happy to see the other illustrious members of the family, Mr. Vijay Berlia, Mr. Aditya Berlia, Dr. Neha Berlia, Mr. Nishant Berlia, and others. Often we wonder, why do we celebrate the birthdays and centenary of a few people and remember them well beyond their lifetime? In this context, I would like to recall an episode from one of the greatest epics of this country, the Mahabharata, which beautifully illustrates this connection. In Yaksha Prashna, Yama, disguised as a Yaksha, poses a number of questions to the oldest of the Pandava princes, Yudhishthira, on the proper values that should guide one's life. One of them is, what is the right path? Yudhishthira answers for this question of Yama. Arguments lead to no certain conclusions. The Srutis are different from one another. There is no one rishi whose authority is accepted by all. The truth about dharma and duty is hidden in the cave of our hearts. Therefore, that alone is the right path which the great have traversed. This answer rings true to me. Great people live among the rest of us and handle the same vicissitudes of life, but emerge victorious because their intuition is finely honed. We can, of course, admire them from a distance, but can do better by learning a little more about them to personalize in our own life. It is one reason why we celebrate such people and cherish their birthdays and centenaries. Where can we find a better example than Dr. Stya Paul, the personality whom we are remembering and celebrating today? The Vijay Group, among its many initiatives, also has a rich heritage of more than 5 decades providing quality education at both school and higher education level. In her communication, Mrs. Sushma had specifically highlighted the importance of education as a key element of her group's activities and had asked me to share my thoughts about the new educational policy, we use the acronym NEP 2020, keeping in mind the erudite nature of today's audience and also the presence of a large body of students. Accordingly, in the next few minutes available to me, I shall speak about the broad contours of the NEP 2020. NEP 2020 provides an integrated yet flexible approach to education. Further, it has kept the interconnectedness of the various phases of education in mind and how the same will enable continuity, coherence, and processes to ultimately result in an end-to-end educational roadmap for the country. An articulation of a broad view of education encompassing the holistic development with special emphasis on kindling of the creative potential of each individual in all its richness and complexity has grown increasingly popular in the recent years. The policy thus aims at the development of the 21st century skills for the students while giving enough flexibility in making choices consistent with the dynamics of a knowledge society. The policy has recommended transformative changes in the way the school education need to be configured. In the contemporary times, advances in developmental, cognitive, and educational psychology have considerably influenced our thinking about how do we need to address the teaching learning processes of the youngsters in their early childhood. Thus, the change from the 1 10 plus 2 design to the expanded 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 structure is based on our better understanding of the scientific basis, which provides insights of the child's learning trajectory from birth to the secondary school. Between the ages 3 to 14, Children gradually transition from perceptual learning to conceptual learning and then on to the prescriptive learning and able to then deal with abstractive ideas from the age 3 to the age 14, recognizing the developmental trajectory of the child, which I mentioned just now. School education is structured as foundational, primary, and middle in conformity with the above mentioned characteristics of the evolution of a child's learning ability. The final secondary level, that is the 4 year stage from the ages 14 to 15 to 18, is when the students can explore their interests and strength. Critically, the policy calls for exposure to vocational education at this stage so that the students are fully prepared to decide at the end of 15 years whether they will pursue vocational education or higher education. The policy recommends mastery of at least one vocational subject during this period. A schooling system that respects these natural developmental phases of a child will prepare our students far better for higher education, including professional and vocational options. Coming to the higher education, two important policy shifts emphasized at the undergraduate level are the emphasis on the multidisciplinarity and holistic approach to education, and the second one, which is a 4 year degree program. This holistic nature of education, also called the liberal education in the contemporary discussions, traces its origin to the age old idea of liberal arts discussed 1400 years back in the classical Indian texts on education like Banabhatta's Kadambari, wherein a truly educated person was described as the one who has mastered 64 kalas. The kalas here encompass music, dance, painting, sculpture, languages, and literature, in addition to, of course, subjects such as science, engineering, and mathematics, as well as vocational subjects. In a similar perspective, Albert Einstein once said, and I quote, all religions, arts, and sciences are branches from the same tree. This holistic view of all human knowledge and inquiry as fundamentally connected is reflected in the history of higher education to the present day. This view holds that a broad and interwoven education is essential to the preparation of citizens for life, work, and civic participation. Our present system looks to achieve mastery only in one or few silos, and a short sighted policy would imply have called for improving a job readiness on the day one. This policy recognizes that such an approach is dangerously out of step with a world that is rapidly changing. It recognizes that students must be given a much broader interdisciplinary foundation so that they can adopt and reinvent themselves as necessary over their entire working lives. I'm happy to note from your own write-ups, you sent quite a lot of write-ups about the educational institution you are running and you are managed. I find that you have kept many of these concepts and ideas very much in mind in also planning your own teaching and learning processes. Undergraduate degree will be either a 3 or 4 year duration with multiple exit options within this period with appropriate certifications. A certificate after completing 1 year in a discipline including vocational and professional areas, or a diploma after 2 years, or a bachelor's degree after 3 years. The 4 year program will provide students with opportunities to fully experience the impact of a holistic and multidisciplinary aspect of the undergraduate education, which aims at developing all the capacities, not just only intellectual, but aesthetic, social, physical, emotional, and moral capacities in an integrated manner. Many of these characteristics, Sushmaji mentioned about it in her own talk in the different contexts, but one can see that these are part of a complete education that we are proposing under the new policy. Also, by integrating vocational education with undergraduate education, the policy ensures that the students will be provided with an avenue into the world of work that will be increasingly important for the 21st century. I want to clearly emphasize this point because we tend to have a very narrow conception of vocational education and therefore undervalue it. With advances in technology such as artificial intelligence, virtual reality, or augmented reality, we clearly foresee an increasing number of hybrid jobs where a human vocational skills will complement the capabilities of high-tech equipment. The higher education system, therefore, is necessary to prepare students for such kind of jobs. Similarly, there's a compelling case for moving school teacher education to higher educational institutions. Not only does this immediately raise the stature of school teachers by placing their profession at par with other options for graduates, but it also recognizes that only the higher education system can provide school teachers with the knowledge that is broad enough and deep enough to strengthen our schooling system. The policy also highlights the critical need to better manage research at all levels, whether it is pure research, whether it is applied research, whether it is translational research, or research to address specific needs of industry, the social problems, strategic demands, and many such other requirements. Of course, I may mention that this is in addition to the role of research to contribute new fundamental knowledge and enrichment. This management of research will be provided by the National Research Foundation, a new institution we have recommended, which will be an autonomous institution to nurture a vibrant research ecosystem through adequate funding, mentoring, and careful monitoring. It will support multidisciplinary research in the arts and humanities, social sciences, sciences and mathematics, engineering technology, including educational technology. In fact, educational technology research will play a crucial role not only in achieving a gross enrollment ratio. We have in fact targeted 2035 to reach a gross enrollment ratio of 50% by improving access to quality higher education, but in improving the resilience of the entire educational system from disruptions, such as the one we are facing today. In this regard, the National Research Foundation will work closely with the National Educational Technology Forum, NETF, a new autonomous entity recommended in the policy, which will provide a platform for crucial dialogue between educators and educational technology entrepreneurs. To be with all of you at this particular point, I think I have to conclude because of the time limits. But I would like to say that there are many other points in the policy, whether it is related to distance education, whether it is related to adult education, lifelong education, education on languages, and so on. There are plenty of it which has been covered, but this gives you a flavor of the kind of things we are thinking under the new policy for driving the educational scenario of this country in the coming years. I would like to conclude with a few remarks, which is a little more personal with all of you. To be with all of you on this August occasion is a special privilege. Men like Dr. Stya has always influenced the course of the development of this country in a transformatory way. We all have so much to learn from his approaches, methods, and thoughts. Education has always a special place in his heart, and this was amply stressed by Srimati Sushmaji. Let us carry forward his mission and vision to propel India to higher pedestal as a knowledge-driven, vibrant society, and thus enable it to play its rightful role among the community of nations. On this memorable occasion, let us rededicate ourselves to the ideas and ideals that he stood for and carry forward the very extraordinary agenda that Dr. Satya Paul has laid for the future. I wish you, Sushmaji, as well as your family and all the members of the extended family, the very best in the coming years. Thank you very much.
That was indeed a very enlightening address by Dr. Kasturi Ranganji. Thank you so much, sir. Now, I would request Mrs. Sushma Paul Berlia to felicitate our chief guest with a memento and a shawl as token of love and gratitude. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we present a short film on Dr. Satyapal. We all know him as an eminent industrialist, educationist, great visionary, philanthropist, and freedom fighter who dedicated his life towards man making and nation building. It is difficult to capture the multifaceted personality of Dr. Satyapal. However, we are attempting to give you a glimpse of his illustrious life through this short film.
कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भो मा ते सङ्गोऽस्त्वविकर्मणि.
Eminent industrialist, educationist, freedom fighter, and philanthropist, Dr. Satyapal founded the APJ Satya and Swaran Group that has achieved an iconic status in independent India. The group is known as a trusted symbol of quality and excellence in the country's industrial landscape. A pioneering visionary with a deep commitment to society, Dr. Paul remained the inspiration and the guiding force behind the APJ Education Society, which he established in 1967. Today, the society provides quality education from pre-primary to doctoral levels to over 32,000 students through 29 educational institutions. Dr. Satyapal was also the founder-chancellor of the APJ Satya University, India's first liberal arts and meta university. APJ Satya University aims to produce young Renaissance men and women who would be leaders of today and tomorrow. Born on the 4th of October in the year 1919, he surged ahead and faced all the challenges with firm determination. A brilliant scholar, Dr. Satyapal was a university gold medalist in mathematics in undivided Punjab. During the course of the independence struggle in India, he became quite involved as a freedom fighter. As a result of his active participation, he was imprisoned by the British during the famous Quit India movement. Dr. Satyapal lost his parents at a very young age, but he took up the responsibilities of taking care of his entire family and running the family business. Under his inspirational leadership, the APJ Satya and Swaran Group has become one of the most reputed corporate houses of the country. Apart from its large social commitment to education, it is actively participating in other business enterprises as well. Throughout his long and illustrious life, Dr. Satyapal held responsible positions reflecting his versatility, his leadership, and his eminence. Numerous awards and honors were bestowed upon Dr. Satyapal, though he never desired any monuments for himself. Dr. Satyapal's humility, simplicity, and affection impressed one and all. The happiest moments of his life were spent with children. He made us believe that it is not a disgrace if dreams remained unfulfilled, but it is a disgrace if we have no dreams at all. A true Karma Yogi, Dr. Satyapal retained his zeal for hard work even during his advanced age and remained keenly involved in the management of the APJ institutions. active till the very end, he departed from the world peacefully on the 7th of June 2010 while preparing to leave for office. His daughter, Sushma Paul Barlia, together with her husband, Vijay Barlia, and their children, Nishant, Aditya, and Neha, carry forward the legacy of excellence, trust, and growth of the group. You are a spiritual being. You are energy, and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes from one form to another. Therefore, the pure essence of you has always been and will always be with us.
What an inspiring film. Dr. Satyapal's life had been exemplary, and he illuminated all those who came in contact with him. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Neha Barlia, granddaughter of Dr. Satyapal and daughter of Mrs. Sushma Paul Barlia and Mr. Vijay Barlia. Dr. Neha Barlia received her bachelor's degree in economics from Stanford University and her master's and PhD in banking and finance from the University of St. Gallen, Switzerland. Dr. Neha Barlia directs and executes key projects in a number of companies of the group. She is involved in planning and execution of infrastructure, processes, general administration, and high-impact projects of the group. She is currently co-chair of Real Estate Committee of ASSOCHAM. She has received numerous awards, including Young Entrepreneur of the Year at National Icon Awards and Next Gen Power Icon at the Times Power Icon Awards. She is a nationally ranked show jumper and dressage horse rider, and a very gifted sarod player. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we present a sarod recital by Dr. Neha Barlia.
Good evening. Today I'll be performing Rageshri. I'll be playing the Vilambit part, and this Vilambit has 3 tans. Tans then would be followed by the Antra, and then would make a short stop, after which I'll be playing Drut part. And this particular Rageshri Rag I learnt while I was a student in APJ School, Sheikh Rai. And the teacher here, the instrumental teacher, his name was Mr. Bhaskar Bose. And we learned a large number of rags when we studied here. And this rag, I think I'm playing here after 15 years. So I've been performing, last year I performed Rag Desh. And this year I decided to try to perform something I haven't performed in a very long time. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Nehaji, for that scintillating Sarod recital. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the final highlight of the evening, when Bhajan Samrat Sri Anup Jalota ji will delight us with his enchanting bhajan recital. Sri Anup Jalota is well known and leading Indian singer and musician, best known for his performances in bhajans and ghazals. He is popularly known as the Bhajan Samrat or the Emperor of Bhajans. He's been conferred with Padma Shri in the field of classical music vocal. However, more than any award, it is the huge love and affection of people that has catapulted him to greater heights and to being one of the most popular singers in the country. We are all eagerly awaiting the music maestro to start the bhajan recital. Over to you, Anupji.
Shri Anup Jalota ji, we are indeed overwhelmed at your presence with us today. Not only are you the Bhajan Samrat, but you are somebody who, through your music, has the ability and power to connect us to the divine. And as you, I'm sure, would kindly remember, we had the privilege of having you with us on the celebration of my father's 75th birthday so very many years ago, but it seems just like yesterday, and we await to hear you.
विद्वान सर्वते पूजते, सर्वत्र पूजते। जो विद्वान होता है वो संसार के किसी भी कोने में हो, उसको पूजा जाता है। इसीलिए विद्या का जो आदान प्रदान है उसको सबसे बड़ा दान माना गया है। डॉक्टर पॉल ने अपने जीवन में जो काम किया उससे वे एक महापुरुष बन गए। आज 101st एनिवर्सरी हम यहाँ सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं। कितनी खुशी की बात है कि उनके परिवार ने उनके ही काम को आगे बढ़ाया और आज एपीजे फैमिली मिलकर इस सुंदर कार्य को आगे बढ़ा रही है। मैं आपको कुछ भजन गीत सुनाऊंगा, आशा है आपको पसंद आएगा। ऐसी लागी लगन, ऐसी लागी लगन, ऐसी लागी लगन, ऐसी लागी लगन। ऐसी लागी लगन, ऐसी लागी लगन, ऐसी लागी लगन, लागी लागी रे लगन, लागी लागी रे लगन। ऐसी लागी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन, ऐसी लागी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। वो तो गली गली हरी गुन गाने लगी, ऐसी लागी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। वो तो गली 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 हरी गुन गाने लगी। महलों में पली बन के जुगन चली, महलों में पली बन के जुगन चली। मीरा रानी दीवानी कहाने लगी, ऐसी लागी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। वो वो तो गली गली हरी गुन गाने लगी, ऐसी लगी लगन। कोई रोके नहीं, कोई टोके नहीं, मीरा गोविंद गोपाल गाने लगी। कोई रोके नहीं, कोई टोके नहीं, मीरा गोविंद गोपाल गाने लगी। बैठी संतों के संग रंगी मोहन के रंग, मीरा प्रेमी प्रीतम को मनाने लगी। वो तो गली गली हरी गाने लगी, ऐसी लगी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। वो तो गली 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 हरी गुन गाने लगी, मैंने हुए पगी बनके जोगन चली। मीरा रानी दीवानी गाने लगी, ऐसी लगी लगन। राणा ने विष दिया मानो अमृत दिया, राणा ने विष दिया मानो अमृत दिया। सारी हरी धब 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 हरी 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 गरे धरे नि धरे नि सा गरे मामा गा बाबा गा नि गा सा नि गा राणा ने विष दिया मानो अमृत दिया। मीरा सागर में सरिता समाने लगी, दुख लाखों सहे मुझसे गोविंद कहे। मीरा गोविंद गोपाल गाने लगी, वो तो गली गली हरी गुन गाने लगी, ऐसी लगी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। वो तो गली गली हरी गुन गाने लगी, मैं बनी बनके जोगन चली। मीरा रानी दीवानी गाने लगी, ऐसी लगी लगन। ऐसी लगी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। वो तो गली गली हरी गुन गाने लगी, मैं कभी बनके जोगन चली। मीरा रानी दीवानी गाने लगी, ऐसी लगी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। ऐसी लगी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। ऐसी लगी लगन, मीरा हो गई मगन। अच्युतं केशवं कृष्ण दामोदरम्, अच्युतं केशवं कृष्ण दामोदरम्, राम नारायणं जानकी वल्लभं, राम नारायणं जानकी वल्लभम्। अच्युतं केशवं कृष्ण दामोदरम्, राम नारायणं जानकी वल्लभम्। कौन कहता है भगवान आते नहीं, कौन कहता है भगवान आते नहीं। तुम मीरा की जैसे बुलाते नहीं, तुम मीरा के जैसे बुलाते नहीं। अच्युतम केशवम कृष्ण दामोदरम, अच्युतम केशवम राम नारायणम जानकी वल्लभम, राम नारायण। कौन कहता है भगवान सोते नहीं? कौन कहता है भगवान सोते नहीं? कौन कहता है भगवान सोते नहीं? वीर शबरी के जैसे तुम खिलाते नहीं, माँ यशोदा के जैसे तुम सुलाते नहीं। अच्युतम केशवम कृष्ण दामोदरम, अच्युतम केशवम कृष्ण दामोदरम, राम नारायण जानकी वल्लभम, राम नारायण जानकी वल्लभम। कौन कहता है भगवान नाचते नहीं? कौन कहता है भगवान नाचते नहीं? गोपियों की तरह तुम नचाते नहीं, गोपियों की तरह तुम नचाते नहीं। अच्युतम केशवम कृष्ण दामोदरम, अच्युतम राम नारायणम जानकी वल्लभम, राम नारायणम जानकी वल्लभम, राम नारायणम जानकी वल्लभम। नीरे सा सरे मरे धनी सरी रे मा पा धा मा रे ध रे नी ध, मा प ध ध रे नी ध रे सा। राम नाम की लूट है, राम नाम की लूट है। लूट सके तो लूट, अंतकाल पछताएगा जब, प्राण जाएंगे छूट। तेरे मन में राम तन में राम, तेरे मन में राम तन में राम, तेरे मन में राम तन में राम, रोम रोम में राम रे। राम सुमिर ले ध्यान कर, उड़ जगत के काम रे। बोल राम बोल राम बोल राम राम राम, बोल राम बोल राम बोल राम राम राम। तेरे मन में राम तन में राम, रोम रोम में राम रे। राम सुमिर ले ध्यान कर, उड़ जगत के काम रे। बोल राम बोल राम राम राम, बोल राम राम राम। माया में तू उलझा उलझा दर दर ढूंढाई, माया में तू उलझा उलझा दर दर ढूंढाई। अब तू करता मन भारी जब माया साथ छुड़ाई, अब तू करता मन भारी जब माया साथ छुड़ाई। दिन तो बीता दौड़ धूप में ढल जाए ना शाम रे बोलो राम बोलो राम राम बोलो राम बोलो राम 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 रोम रोम में राम राम सुने ध्यान लगा ले छोड़ जगत के काम रे बोलो राम बोलो राम 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 बोलो राम 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 तन के भीतर 5 लुटेरे डाल रहे हैं डेरा तन के भीतर 5 लुटेरे डाल रहे हैं डेरा वैसे हम लोग भी 5 ही बैठे हुए हैं। तो ये कौन है 5 लुटेरे जो दिन रात हम सबको लुटा करते हैं और इन 5 को हमको खिलाते पिलाते रहते हैं इनका पालन पोषण की सेवा सब करते हैं और ये हमको लूटते रहते हैं तो इन्हें पहचानिए इनसे दूर रहिए नहीं तो सब लूट के ले जाएंगे तन के भीतर 5 लुटेरे डाल रही है डेरा काम क्रोध मद लोभ मोह ने उसको कैसा घेरा काम क्रोध मद लोभ मोह ने उसको कैसा घेरा भूल गया तू राम रतन भूला पूजा का काम रे बोलो राम राम बोलो राम बोलो राम 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 रोम रोम में राम रे राम सुन रे ध्यान लगा रे थोड़ जगत के काम रे बोलो राम 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 बोलो राम 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 अंतिम पंक्तियां हैं और हमारे आपके जीवन में सबके जीवन में बचपन से लेकर बुढ़ापे तक जो होता है जो गुजरता है वो इन 4 पंक्तियों में उतार दिया गया बचपन बीता खेल खेल में भरी जवानी सोया बचपन बीता खेल खेल में भरी जवानी सोया भरी जवानी सोया भरी जवानी सोया सो सो रे 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 बनी रे 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 सारे नी रे रे बनी बनी रे 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 ओ रे 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 बनी रे बचपन बीता खेल खेल में हरी जवानी सोया देखो बुढ़ापा अब तो सोचे क्या पाया क्या खोया देखो बुढ़ापा अब तो सोचे क्या पाया क्या खोया देर नहीं है अब भी बंदे ले ले उसका नाम रे बोलो राम बोलो राम बोलो राम बोलो राम राम रोम रोम में राम रे राम मिले ध्यान करे और जगत के काम रे बोलो राम 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 बोलो राम 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 बोलो राम बोलो राम राम ये गजल पेश कर रहा हूं। आप गैरों की बात करते हैं, आप गैरों की बात करते हैं, हमने अपने भी आजमाए हैं। लोग कांटों से बच के चलते हैं, हमने फूलों से जख्म खाए हैं। वो मेरा था, वो मेरा था, ये बताना अजीब लगता है। वो मेरा था, ये बताना अजीब लगता है। अब उससे आंख मिलाना अजीब लगता है। वो मेरा था, ये बताना अजीब लगता है। जो जिंदगी में कभी भी मेरा न हो पाया, जो जिंदगी में कभी भी मेरा न हो पाया, अब उसका ख्वाब में आना अजीब लगता है। वो मेरा था, ये बताना अजीब लगता है। बड़े खुलूस से दावत तो उसने भेजी है, बड़े खुलूस से दावत तो उसने भेजी है। पर उसकी बज़्म में जाना अजीब लगता है। वो मेरा था, ये बताना अजीब लगता है। आखिरी शेर पेश कर रहा हूं। हाजी से कहा, हाजी से कहा हमेशा हमारे हाथों में, हाजी से कहा हमेशा हमारे हाथों में, अब उससे हाथ मिलाना अजीब लगता है। वो मेरा था, ये बताना अजीब लगता है। अब उससे आंख मिलाना अजीब लगता है। वो मेरा था, ये बताना अजीब लगता है। ओ पालनहारी निर्गुण न्यारी। इस गाने में जो इसका दूसरा अंतर आएगा वो आपको दीप्ति चतुर्वेदी हमारे साथ बैठी वो सुनाएंगे। ओ पालनहारी निर्गुण न्यारी, ओ पालनहारी निर्गुण न्यारी, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही, तुम्हारे बिन हमरे उलझन सुलझाओ भगवन, हमरे उलझन सुलझाओ भगवन, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही, तुम्हारे बिन तुम ही हमका वो संभाले, तुम ही हमरे रखवाले, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही, तुम्हारे बिन चंदा में तुम ही तो भरे हो चांदनी, सूरज में उजाला तुम्ही से, चंदा में तुम ही तो भरे हो चांदनी, सूरज में उजाला तुम्ही से, ये गगन है मगन तुम ही तो दिए हो ये सितारे, भगवन ये जीवन तुम ही न संवारोगे तो क्या कोई संवारे। ओ पालनहारी निर्गुण न्यारी, ओ पालनहारी निर्गुण न्यारी, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही, तुम्हारे बिन पालनहारी निर्गुण न्यारी, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही, हमरे उलझन सुलझाओ भगवन, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही, तुम्हारे बिन हमरा कोनो नाही। शाम तेरी बंसी तेरी बंसी पुकारे राधा नाम, लोग करे मीरा को यूं ही बदनाम, लोग करे मीरा को यूं ही बदनाम, सांवरे की बंसी को बजने से काम, सांवरे की बंसी को बजने से काम। राधा कभी शाम हो तो मीरा कभी शाम, राधा कभी शाम हो तो मीरा कभी शाम। कौन जाने बांसुरिया किसको बुलाए, जिसके मन भाए वो उसी के गुण गाए। कौन नहीं बंसी की धुन का गुलाम, कौन नहीं बंसी की धुन का गुलाम। लोग करे मीरा कोई यूं बदनाम, लोग करे मीरा कोई यूं बदनाम। जमुना की लहरें, जमुना की लहरें बंशी पट की छैया, किसका नहीं है बोलो कृष्ण कन्हैया। जमुना की लहरें बंशी पट की छैया, किसका नहीं है बोलो कृष्ण कन्हैया। श्याम का दीवाना कृष्ण का दीवाना तो सारा ब्रज धाम, श्याम का दीवाना तो सारा ब्रज धाम। राधा का भी श्याम हो तो मीरा का भी श्याम, राधा का भी श्याम हो तो मीरा का भी श्याम। श्याम तेरी बंसी कन्हैया तेरी बंसी पुकारे, राधा लोग करे मीरा कोई भी करना, लोग करे मीरा कोई भी करना। आप सबको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूँ कि मुझे एपीजे फैमिली ने मौका दिया एक बार फिर आप सबके सामने आने का। ये सब कोरोना की प्रॉब्लम खत्म हो जाए फिर आऊंगा सामने आपको आके सुनाऊंगा। तब तक के लिए हम सबको इजाजत दीजिए। शाम तेरी पुकारे राधा, लोग मीरा को यूं ही बदनाम, लोग कहे मीरा को यूं ही बदनाम, लोग कहे मीरा को यूं ही बदनाम। बहुत
What an enthralling performance by Sri Anup Jalota ji. Thank you so much. Before we proceed for the felicitation of Sri Anup Jalota ji, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to give a special welcome to Mr. Vijay Barlia, Mr. Nishant Barlia, and Mr. Aditya Barlia. Mr. Vijay Barlia, Chairman Swaran Group, is one of India's leading industrialists who has transformed his business enterprise into one of India's first true multinationals with a significant global presence across the chemicals, plastics, and petrochemicals value chain. Known for his financial and strategic acumen, he has given an entrepreneurial edge and a unique economic and financial vision to the APJ Swaran Group. He is also leading a number of new initiatives on the international front. Mr. Nishant Barlia, eldest grandson of Dr. Satyapal, is co-promoter of the APJ Satya Group and the Swaran Group. An alumnus of Stanford University and Harvard Business School, He has worked with group's operations in India and abroad and is actively involved with the group's pharmaceutical vertical. He is also the Pro-Chancellor APJ Satya University. Mr. Nishant Barlia has headed several committees of leading industry chambers. Mr. Aditya Barlia, grandson of Dr. Satyapal, is a co-promoter of the APJ Satya Group and Swaran Group. A graduate of Stanford University and an MBA from the Harvard Business School, he carries forth the family legacy of entrepreneurship, social contribution, and trying to create a better society and world. He's a prolific speaker and writer, and this year he is also the chairperson of CII Delhi State. Now I request Sri Vijay Barlia along with Mr. Nishant and Mr. Aditya Barlia to felicitate Sri Anup Jalota ji with a memento and a shawl as token of love and gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, our founder chairman, Dr. Satyapal, was greatly inspired by an Urdu couplet of Iqbal, from which the motto of the entire group, Soaring High is My Nature, was born. Tu शाहीन है परवाज है काम तेरा, तेरे सामने आसमां और भी हैं. You are a falcon, soaring high is your nature. There are skies yet for you to conquer. Dr. Satyapal lived his life by this motto, and the rich legacy of his values and achievements is a source of inspiration to all of us, to always keep striving for excellence so as to realize our full potential in all its dimensions. This is reflected in a song that we are now going to present. It has been written, composed, and sung by APJites.
मंजिल पे जिन्हें जाना है वो शिकवा नहीं करते, शिकवा जो करते हैं वो पहुंचा नहीं करता.
कभी गम, कभी खुशी कभी गम, जीवन में दोनों है संग. तुम जो इसमें जीना सीखो, भर जाए जीवन में रंग हो. कभी खुशी कभी गम.
Purity, patience, and perseverance are the three essentials to success. Every relation is God's creation. Every moment of life is celebration.
फूल और कलियों को लेकर गुलशन को तरतीब देंगे, मंजिल को पाकर रहेंगे, मंजिल पे ही दम भरेंगे. गीतों भरी ये ज़मीं हो, रंगों भरा आसमां, उठेंगे तूफान बनकर, चलता रहेगा कारवां. Soaring high, soaring high.
शाहीन है, परवाज है काम तेरा, तेरे सामने आसमां और भी है, और भी है, और भी है।
मिलकर चलेंगे हमेशा, मुश्किल घड़ी जब भी आए, दिल की शम्मा हम जलाकर दुनिया को राह दिखाए। लगे हो बादल घनेरे, आएंगे रोशन सवेरे, हम वो परिंदे हैं जिनको छूना है ये आसमां। Soaring high, soaring high, soaring high is my nature. Soaring high, soaring high, soaring high is my nature. Soaring high, soaring high, soaring high is my nature. Soaring high, soaring high, soaring high is my nature.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Mrs. Sushma Paul Barlia, Mr. Vijay Barlia, Mr. Nishant Barlia, Mr. Aditya Barlia, and Dr. Neha Barlia, and all members of APJ Satya and Swaran family, we thank you all for gracing this occasion and making the 101st birth anniversary celebrations of Dr. Satya Paul a truly memorable one. Thank you once again.